Hello and welcome. Sitting outside again, I'm wondering if the picture might keep going like this. I hope not. It could be. I don't know much about these things. I have some mosquito repellent smoke things, and maybe the camera focuses on the smoke. If I wave my hands around a little, it may focus in this direction. We'll see. But not to worry, just close your eyes, and it's time to reflect on the Dharma. Listen to your comments, your questions, and I will try and respond with my ideas coming from experience of my practice as a Buddhist monk living here in Sri Lanka now for well over a year. You'd think I'd know a lot about Sri Lanka by now, but I don't, because I'm a Buddhist monk. I didn't come here to travel, but to find a suitable place to practice, and that is what I've been doing, staying in one place. I have been to one so-called tourist attraction, the temple at Kandy, where they have the relic or the Buddha's tooth housed, a very important Buddhist holy site here. But the others yet I haven't been to. Maybe one day I'll get round to it. But my homage, my pilgrimage, is more these days internal, as and where it can be for you. Even the Buddha said that we don't need to travel, to go to the ends of the earth or the universe to find enlightenment. The answers were all here within this fathom-length body, or bag of skin containing horrible things, is how he described it. And this is of course true. This is how we experience suffering, which is what the Buddha taught. It's how we understand the cause of suffering, and therefore can see, albeit temporarily or just a glimpse of, freedom from that, the end of suffering, by following the way the Buddha teaches us, the Noble Eightfold Path. The first comment here, I just want meditation without the ism part. That's okay, just meditate. And ism is just a suffix, a little 3-letter item added on the end of either positive or words with a positive connotation or negative. But we have Buddhism, Taoism, fascism, communism. It bears no relation to the prefix. Buddha, means awakened one. So ism is just relating to the action of becoming awakened, or what one has to do, what path one has to follow to become awakened. It doesn't necessarily have to be considered as a negative attribution to the prefix. So I'm not sure quite that's what you meant. You may have meant the religious side, what you might see in the glorious temples and lots of chanting and what seems to be rites and rituals and lots of activity going on. Of course, you can just practice what the Buddha taught us to practice, as is all detailed in the suttas, and this is by far the most available to us, especially if we're not in a Buddhist country, because we have access to all of that knowledge, all of those teachings, the Dharma. So we have the Buddha, the prefix to Buddhism, our teacher, the Dharma, his teachings. There's not a Dharmism, but it could be an ism of such when one takes it into your practice, because it's a way of living, and that is just following the Noble Eightfold Path. You can isolate meditation as a practice if you just want to have the physical, material benefits of meditation, that is calmness of the mind and relaxation of the body. But if you want to experience enlightenment as the Buddha taught us, and by the way he taught us, by following the Noble Eightfold Path, we need to practice it holistically. It can be divided into 3 categories of sila, moral virtue, samadhi, meditation, and panya, wisdom. So we need to establish a life, a style, a way of living, of doing no harm. And this is sila, moral virtue. Just in the case of lay people, just keeping 5 simple precepts. No killing, no stealing, lying, or taking of intoxicants. I missed the 3rd one. No killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, or the taking of intoxicants. And by this you establish yourself a very firm foundation for your meditation. If you are going about life carelessly, killing, stealing, and committing breaches in sexual misconduct, lying to people, and drinking alcohol or taking intoxicants in other forms, then you will find it very difficult to enjoy meditation or to have much success or progress in meditation. Maybe you might even get physical relaxation and even some mental calm, but this is more of a yogic practice than a spiritual practice of developing holistically the Noble Eightfold Path as taught by the Buddha. And then that encompasses the development of panya, wisdom. That is not an intellectual gaining of knowledge, but an understanding of the characteristics of existence. For instance, anicca, impermanence, dukkha, suffering, and anatta, not self, that I speak of so often in these talks. And developing the understanding of the benefits of keeping sila in conjunction with practicing meditation. And therefore, through meditation, developing within our minds wholesome mind states, whilst at the same time reducing any unwholesome mind states, breaking down the kilesas of greed, of hatred, of delusion, slowly eroding them until they're gone. And this is purifying our minds. This is the wisdom we're talking about here. So if you consider being good and becoming wise as an ism, then you cannot leave it out. But it isn't an ism. Ism is just 3 letters. And without going into all the semantics and usages of such suffixes and prefixes, it's unnecessary to waste time. It's more important to discuss and know what we've just looked at there, the practice, what it is, than look at words and then associating them with other words that may have a negative connotation, a judgment already assumed about something. Then, on top of that, there is this whole layer of religiosity, especially in Buddhist countries, whereby there are many goings on, especially at this time of year, Katina festivals from the full moon of October until the full moon of November, this month, though this lunar month, that is, there are many. You'll hear even in the morning, at my morning live chanting sessions, horns and drums going on in the background, maybe, which are all the festivities going on. These are reinforcing and generating what we call saddha, or faith, but not faith as in belief as such, or so much, although sometimes it can be misinterpreted and the practice itself can be considered such. But what the Buddha taught and how it is taught is that saddha, or shraddha as they pronounce it, I think, here and say it, they use a lot of, it sounds like Sanskrit here, even though we have all of our Pali canon translations and original scriptures coming from this country, how we've come to hear about Buddhism in the West. Actually here, it's more the usage of their own dialect, their own words, which seems to involve a little bit and a lot of more Sanskrit, so I get a bit confused. But, or they certainly don't understand what I'm saying. But that's never mind. There's plenty of monks here for everybody, that's no problem. But there's a lot going on. But what this activity involves is establishing and building and generating and reinforcing faith, but of a nature in the way of confidence in the practice, confidence in the Buddha as a teacher, confidence in the Sangha as passing on those teachings and living by an example as set by the Buddha in accordance with the Vinaya Pitaka, and the Dharma, most importantly, the Sutta Pitaka, which is also very well known around in this country and in other Buddhist countries by the lay people, being that they're taught it in school. They have confidence in those teachings as to how it brings about happiness and contentment and peace of mind within their lives by living this threefold summary contained within the Noble Eightfold Path of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. So these activities are enjoyable, colourful spectacles that provide support to the temples and the monasteries, yes, but more importantly provide support to the lay folks practicing those activities, celebrating those festivities, in order to build confidence in the teacher, the teachings, and the practice thereof. I'm Muslim. I love Buddha and his teachings. I want to become a monk, but here is problem, because if I will become Buddhist monk, so according to Islam, I have to go in hell for eternal time. Okay, so I can't really comment on that very well because I don't know Islam. But I'm pretty sure that by becoming a Buddhist monk, you would not be, in the eyes of Muslims, you'd be abandoning that religion, that faith. Yes, that is to be said. But you would not be, even in the eyes of other Muslims, I think, banishing yourself to eternal hell, if indeed there was such a thing. Because you're not committing anything. You are practicing, or you're dedicating your life to practicing a life of moral virtue. The one thing that most religions have in common is that they want to encourage people to continue to live within the realms of virtue, of morality, whether it's the 10 Commandments or whether it's whatever's written in the Quran, or it's the 5 precepts. They're all encouraging us to live without killing, stealing, being unfaithful, lying. And actually most religions, with the exception of Christianity, also are against intoxicants in the form of, say, alcohol, for instance. So we have that in common. When comparing Buddhism to other religions, it is safe to say that it never comes up against much resistance or abrasion, because it is the other religions that have a lot more added in terms of what one must believe and worship, that of course Buddhism doesn't have. So Buddhism isn't saying do not believe, do not worship. It is just giving the alternative without that belief or worship, a practice of moral virtue, meditation and wisdom. So I doubt that you need to be too concerned there, more that you need to explore the depths of Buddhism as and when you can, and consider it as an alternative to your life as you have it at the moment. So it rather depends on where you're living, what your social structure is, how much access you have to Buddhism. Online, of course, it's relatively easy these days, but also can you go to Buddhist temples? Can you speak with Buddhist monks? And also your own religious representatives in your own mosques or temples, wherever you might go to seek such advice. Originally, Gautama was only worshipped by a flame or pillar or wheel or swastika, never worshipped as a body figure. The body is evil, Mara, the devil within. Yes, I mean, that is actually the case. You refer to the Buddha, we refer to the Buddha, the awakened one, as his title. His bodhisattva, pre-Buddha days, pre-awakening days, his name was Siddhartha Gautama. So it's like referring to a monk by their prior to their ordination surname. So I'm not sure why you say that, but Siddhartha Gautama, I noticed in a previous comment you referred to the Buddha as Gautama. I think as our teacher in Buddhism, and through his efforts and practice, I think the Buddha deserves more respect than to be addressed or referred to simply by his surname, which he has given up, renounced, when he went to become an ascetic practitioner as a monk with his friends, a samana. So we're referring to the Buddha, and at the very least, his full title, Siddhartha Gautama, son of the Sakyamuni tribe from Kapilavastu, at least gives some origination and purpose to using that title. So I don't mean to be picky there, but I noticed it's come up a few times, so I'm not sure why it does. Anyway, worshipped by a flame or a pillar or a wheel. Yeah, or an empty chair or some footprints. So these are still commonly in some Zen temples you might go to even to this day. You won't see an effigy, a model, a statue of a Buddha, we call a Buddha Rupa. These, in fact, their design has come about more or later than the Buddha's time, and was based on where Buddhism was quite prominent in Central Europe, Persia, and up towards Greece. The Greek kind of artistry, sculpture, like Greek god that you might see, image of fitness and supremeness and beauty. We do kind of, as human beings that are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, are rather tactile, both tactile with our feeling sense, but also our eyes and our imagination, need something to draw our attention, to focus on. Whether it be a flame, as you say, a flame, a pillar, a wheel, a swastika. I must clarify that. The swastika, I think it usually goes the other way round. You'll see it quite commonly throughout India. It doesn't mean anything to do with the swastika that you might have become accustomed to with more negative connotations in more recent times. But going back even long before the time of the Buddha, the swastika is the symbol for universe or universal supremacy or something like that. I'm not sure of the exact meanings and behind that. So that's what you're referring to there. But what you're referring to, flame, pillar, wheel, swastika, or as I said, an empty chair or footprints in the ground, they're still things, aren't they, that are to draw our focus to. So when we first sit down to meditate, or if we wish to pay homage to our teacher, the Buddha, and bow, then we need somewhere to point ourselves to. Certain faiths point in a certain direction, so towards Mecca, the east. And in fact, Buddha Rupas are usually facing a certain direction, either from the east or to the east. And this is to just give us a point of focus. It isn't a necessity, but it's helpful to help us develop that shraddha, that saddha, that faith, that confidence. And using our bodies and our physical attributes to distinguish and focus that respect in a place, in a direction. And really what came about as a result of that was what we know now as the Buddha Rupa, which you'll see in most Buddhist temples or places of, let's say, worship, because it is more understandable for more people. Most people seeing an empty chair or footprints or a wheel may not really understand where to sit, where to look, where to point or not to point something towards. So with a nice image of our teacher, its accuracy, it's rather neither here nor there. Its colour, his size, there's many versions, is to somewhat irrelevant, to some degree irrelevant, but it is there, and it is somewhere, as I have in my kuti, where I chant in the morning. Opposite me now, my Buddha Rupa, high up on the wall, so it's always above my head, even if I'm standing, and then I don't have to keep walking around the room like this, but I can bow and focus my attention in that direction. And it's also facing east, so it's watching the sun rise, and also going forward on the train. So the planet is going around and around and around, very fast, in fact, 1,000 miles an hour or something like that. You don't notice it. But the Buddha is facing east, so he's facing forward. When you watch the sun set, you're actually facing backwards, so it's like sitting on the other chair on the train, so you're going backwards at 1,000 miles an hour. So it's better to be facing the east, just for meditation purposes. Even though it might seem nice to be watching the sun set, watch the sun rise, then you're facing the right direction all the time. That's somewhat irrelevant, but you're quite right there, but with regards to how it used to be. But there's nothing evil. You say Mara, I think you might even ask me a question about Mara in a minute, so I'll come to that in a minute, and devil within. No, I think we need, you'll see beautiful gold Buddhas covered in flowers and garlands and many other statues and stupas all around them. In my temple in India, it's very beautiful there in the temple, and our meditation centres and all of our branches have all of this, because it really does lift the heart and remind us of our teacher and the respect we owe to him. We're not worshipping that inanimate object. This is what must be stressed. It isn't idol worshipping, it isn't dressing or feeding effigies or making effigies, some images of how we think the Buddha looked. It's a representation of a teacher, and something we can all recognize commonly as somewhere to focus on. And some Westerners say meditation may be sometimes dangerous in some circumstances. Okay, well, you know, so's falling asleep dangerous in some circumstances. If you're driving a car at 80 miles an hour and you fall asleep behind the wheel, dangerous. Practicing samadhi whilst driving, dangerous, yes, acceptable. Other than that, in the appropriate time, at the appropriate time, in the appropriate place, meditation is not dangerous. After all, you're just sitting, doing nothing. Now, if you're taking on other activities in your meditation, other practices that I don't talk about here, outside of the suttas, so something other than just observation of the breath, or the other meditation objects, of which there are many to choose from, but they're mainly just focusing the conscious awareness on one meditation object. Anything outside of that, well, then maybe. But you could, for instance, with certain practices, hyperventilate or suffocate, I don't know. But in the meditation the Buddha teaches us, there is nothing ever dangerous about it. Of course, it requires you to be meditating at the appropriate time, in the appropriate place. So not sitting in the fast lane of the highway, it's going to be dangerous. But at home, in your kuti, when it's nice and quiet, it's perfectly okay. Who is Mara? There we go, I thought that was coming up. Well, Mara is the personification of our kilesas, basically. Our kilesas are lobha, dosa, moha, greed, hatred, and delusion. And in Buddhist mythology, cosmology, we have this personification of those unwholesome desires and aversions and ignorance in what we call Mara. But this Mara could be, depending on your choice and understanding, an individual, a form of deity, godlike person from another realm, or personification, let's say, not a person with a human body, but can manifest itself in all forms, different ways, depending on the subject he or it is addressing. But these are more easily understood as just your kilesas. So the Buddha, whilst trying to be enlightened, was distracted by Mara. And this personification makes it easier for us to understand as this warlike, devil-like creature, as this questioner described a moment ago, coming about and attacking you to try and put you off your meditation. By giving you things to attract your attention, distract you from the focus on your meditation object. Things like desire, lust, greed, and then also, on the other hand, hatred, aversion. These are the kilesas. Now, these will just manifest themselves within you as you try to meditate. You don't need a third party to come along and introduce them. They're there. They're the obstacles, the hindrances that come up in our meditation each and every time we sit to try and meditate. And it is about, the practice is about reducing our susceptibility to those and to be able to see them as just that. And the Buddha said, "I see you, Mara." And that was all he needed to say or think to extinguish that flame, that fire of desire. And we can too say, when the kilesas arise, that one of the 5 hindrances in meditation, whether it's sensual desire, whether it's aversion, laziness, restlessness and worry, or doubt, we can see as they arise and say, "I see you, Mara," rather than having to focus and identify what it is that's getting in the way. Just see it overall by personifying all of your kilesas as one major hindrance, obstacle in the path, in the way of preventing you seeing the truth, being free from suffering, being free from desire, seeing the cause of suffering in desire. So we sit and we practice and we meditate, and yes, Mara, if you personify the kilesas, will appear. I see you, Mara, I see desire arising. Just knowing that is sufficient for it to go away. So that's who Mara is, if you want it to be a person. Okay, hello Bante. What do you think about the Mahasi method of Sati Patana Vipassana? So I don't think about it much. It's more in the Mahasi Sayadaw. I don't know enough about it to comment, really. It's a method of meditation that, and I could be wrong, but to my knowledge isn't actually described as directly as it's taught in its current form in the suttas, like the Anapanasati Sutta teaches us to watch the breath, observe the breath. Mahasi Sayadaw's method is a practice of noting. So we noting, rather than the breath coming in, the breath coming out, we might observe the tummy rising, the tummy falling. And we use the word literally, a mantra, saying rising, rising, falling, falling. And the same with emotions, liking, liking, or not liking, noting. And I don't use that practice myself. So as to what I think about it, it doesn't matter. Because I don't think about it. I don't think it's necessary to add another layer of thinking onto my practice as it is. But some people it's very useful. I mean, often if you're in a situation practicing mindfulness, as Sati Patana describes, this sort of way of mindfulness and seeing clearly, throughout your daily activities, then yes, it's useful perhaps when you're getting angry to maybe, if necessary, note, yes, I can see anger arising, and say, anger, anger. And it may just calm the anger slightly by interrupting the circuit, act as the word, the use of the word mentally, the mantra, acts as a kind of circuit breaker. That's perhaps useful. But for the development of samadhi, so focused attention, to become free from those hindrances, or secluded from those hindrances, developing complete conscious awareness in your, and absorbed attention in your meditation object, it is my, and I could be wrong again, understanding that the Mahasi Sayadaw method doesn't teach that. It simply teaches vipassana, so seeing clearly, insight meditation, the more wisdom, panya, part of the Noble Eightfold Path than the samadhi part. What is the role of psychology, psyche, the ego, etc. in Theravada Buddhism, please? So the mind, not the thinking brain, the mind, which knows what's going on in the thinking brain with all of its emotions arising, and they're having their corresponding physical feelings, whether it be fear, anxiety, whether it be happiness and love, whether it be peace and calm, or whether it be restlessness and worry. All of these, and the study of, in modern day terminology, is psychology. And we consider where the word ego comes from, I, it means I in Latin, I think, possibly wrong there, but I think so, self, what we consider to be self is partly made up of that, this thinking brain with all of its ideas and emotions, likings and dislikings, and this physical body. And what Theravada Buddhism teaches us is that is not our self. What is our self is just that which knows, that overall and amalgamation of all of those separate components as being the result of the causes and conditions put in place. We call the self, or the I, or me, what you see now before you. That, what is the role of psychology and in Theravada Buddhism? Well, it isn't. I mean, Theravada Buddhism is the teachings of the Buddha when this was an insight into the mind and the workings of the mind, from which later science has produced psychology and psychiatry and all of these other aspects that have come about later, which may focus on a particular area. But like I said before, Buddhism is more holistic in it's the way we live to develop that thinking brain through our bodily activities, but purify the mind, that which knows. So that's about where that's its role, really. It doesn't have a specific role. We don't have a job for the psychology monk or something like that to look after mental health. We are developing our mental health continuously as Buddhist practitioners, all of us, with the Dharma from the teachings of the Buddha and the help of the Sangha. What do you think about magic mushrooms? Can they be a tool to enlightenment? I don't think anything about them, and they cannot be a tool to enlightenment. They are an obstacle because they are an intoxicant. They will lead to heedlessness and maybe the breaking of the other 4 precepts. So we don't, as the 5th precept, take intoxicants because it may lead to heedlessness. So you're not being careful and therefore inadvertently, maybe accidentally, breaking the other 4 precepts: killing, stealing, or sexual misconduct, or lying. The latter 2, more easily, under the influence of intoxicants, are broken. So you can see how that can affect your chances of progressing towards enlightenment on this Buddhist path. So they can't be used as a tool. No, they're very much a hindrance to seeing clearly and mindfulness, which is what the practice is about. Seeing clearly and mindfulness, not getting wasted and not seeing clearly and being careless. Is it true that dukkha I experience now is the direct result of something I have done in the past? Yes, it is true that the dukkha you're experiencing now is the direct result or indirect result of something you have done in the past. That is karma. All of our actions, karma means actions, of body, speech and mind, will have results. Vipaka in the Pali language. And what you're experiencing, if you're suffering now, is the results of causes and conditions you've either put in place in the immediate past, or since when you maybe cannot even remember, or even in previous lives, the causes and conditions you've put in place to cause that suffering right now, here and now. But that's okay. You can't change the past, but you can change the future. So in the present moment, here and now, there is in fact no, when you see dukkha as just that, suffering, there is no suffering. It is only suffering if you see it as such and you project it, carry that baggage with you into the future. But if you make a determination here and now in the present moment to leave that suffering behind, if it's a physical pain, if it's an ailment of this nature, if it's physical suffering, then you will know too, this is impermanent and it will also pass with time. Or you will develop a tolerance towards it, get used to it, and it will be less uncomfortable as time goes by. But you can change your fortunes, because you can make the determination here and after to keep the precepts, to practice meditation and to develop wisdom. And this will ensure a more comfortable future. The camera has not been keeping the 5th precept. This was referring to this brum brum brum. I hope it's not doing it today, as I say. If it is, I see there's some of the smoke moving there. That might be what the cause is. It will be then, I will be able to narrow it down to the certain light when I'm sitting out here that is causing that effect. And it's not that the phone, which is getting on a bit now, I suppose, in phone years, is broken or anything like that, because I didn't notice. I don't watch the videos, so I don't know, but I didn't notice, and nobody said it was happening in the videos inside. So there have been some problems with internet, but that's totally unrelated. This is literally the filming part. But I do appreciate you bringing it to my attention, because I wouldn't necessarily know otherwise. So anything like that, those comments are useful, because people do like to see something that's at least to the best of my abilities presented as well as it can be, I suppose. I have some confusion about the ego or self-view. The understanding that I have of the noble truths is that suffering and the cause of suffering are the same thing. I mean that craving is what hurts, not the feeling. Is that true? No, you see, the suffering, in the Buddhist lists, there's nothing repeated. So if the Buddha says, there are in Buddhist Pali words, that is. So if we have a word for Vedana, for instance, feelings, often referred to as consciousness. And some people then take the word citta as consciousness. Well, it's not. Citta is a separate word, so it's a separate thing. Vedana and citta similarly can be considered and described as consciousness or awareness or knowing, but they're very different, and we have two different Pali words. And in the Four Noble Truths we have suffering, and then we have a cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is separate from suffering. We identify the cause in order to eradicate or get rid of the suffering. So they're not the same thing. Craving, desire, is the cause of suffering, but what you're experiencing is the results of the causes and conditions you've put in place, as I've just explained. And that's, I think, also what I've just covered in the last question with regards to ego or self-view. Does the ego depend solely on craving to sustain its self? Rebirth is the result of continued desire or attachment to life, to this body, to things that you like to see, smell, taste, hear, touch, whatever, experience, think about, imagination. What you're attached to is desire, is attachment. This is the subtle form of craving. In the 12 links of dependent origination, it breaks it down step by step from sense contact through to wanting, through to birth or rebirth. And that is initial sense contact, and then not seeing it for just that. Seeing is seeing, hearing is hearing, smelling is smelling, tasting is tasting, touching is touching, and just that, but as something that is more satiable, satisfying and permanent. When you see it as not permanent and unsatisfying, but just fuel to further desire, you can relinquish that craving for that thing, and therefore relinquish its fueling, its potential to push you with momentum into future craving and wanting more. So rebirth in the next moment. I want a cup of tea. You have one sip. Oh, it's nice. You want another sip. Until you get fed up with it and you don't like it anymore. But unfortunately, you then replace that with something else, something stronger, something, rather than you simply quench your thirst in the first place with a sip of water, and it is enough. This is the nature. But ego, or you're using two words here, ego depends solely on craving to sustain itself. This ego is just something in your own imagination, this self that you're attributing to the five khandhas, this body, your physical body, the feelings it has and its sense contact with the external environment, and your memories that you're attributing to what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch and feel. And then your opinions and judgment on all of those things. That is what builds the ego. So it's not just craving, no. Question for future video. Why did you decide to start making these videos, and how does it affect your practice being a monk? So I didn't really decide to start making them. I kind of made one in a reigns only a couple of years ago, and didn't know what I still don't know what I'm doing. I do the same thing as I did that time. Anyway, I had no one to talk to. I suppose I have to admit I was a little bored one day. I was playing around with the phone, did this, pushed a button, and by mistake made a video. And it hasn't changed since. So that's how it happened, by accident really. And then people responded with their comments, with emails, with questions, and it then fuels itself. You know, there's a need, people are asking questions or making comments, so I'm very happy to continue doing it, and I've just continued doing it. I don't have, and you say, does it affect your practice as a monk? Living in solitude, I have no real interaction other than on Pindapata, alms round in the morning, when we don't speak. We don't even say thank you. We may say a short blessing and anumodana, but no more is said on alms round. It's a silent practice. Then I have no, in solitude, other contact. If I'm living in the monastery in India, my main monastery, then many people are coming and they'll want to speak to a monk, ask some questions, and do exactly what we're doing here, this kind of interaction. But living alone and here, not speaking the language, that doesn't happen. And also they've got many other temples and monasteries where they can go and see their own family monks, favourite monks, whatever, in places nearby them. So having lived like that for the last few years, I've taken the opportunity just to simply spend a very short part of the day, which takes no effort at all, really, to look at the comments and questions, then sit down and speak to you about them, as I'm doing now. It takes me as long to do this as the length of this video, because there's no editing, there's no planning. I don't ever think about what I'm going to say next or in the next video. I don't even have a title until it's finished, and then I just pick something from one of the questions if I remember it, and it's as random as that. So there's no effort, so it doesn't actually interfere with my practice any more than it would be if I was living in the monastery, where I'd have many people to see each day, other monks to interact with, plus also lots of duties, as there are in big communities of people. There's lots of work to be done. I don't have anything to do except wash my bowl after I've eaten my meal, and then my time is free for the practicing meditation. So this short time, 40 minutes to an hour each day, talking with you, is really my fun part. It's all fun. I really enjoy my meditation, but this is my interaction with the outside world. I really look forward to sitting down firstly quickly with a cup of coffee and replying to my emails, and then I pull the comments up and sit down and talk to you, more or less the same time, just a few days a week. So it doesn't interfere with my practice of being a monk at all. In fact, it frees me up, because I feel that I've shared enough and hopefully answered your queries satisfactorily, to then relax into my meditation for another day and able to do that undisturbed. And as long as it continues to be of use to people, and I hope there's something there you find useful, then I will, yes, indeed, continue to produce these as long as I'm able to do so. So in that respect, if there's something there you can use it. And if not, just let it go. Don't let it worry you. And until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.